This is Call with Dads, where we dive into the ups, downs, and everything in between when it comes to being a dad. Here, it's all about connecting with a community of dads who are committed to learning and leveling up as fathers. Welcome to Call with Dads. Let's talk.
Yeah, fire away. Go for it.
Let's get started. So, Andy, I appreciate you being here. And again, forgive me for my voice. This is the most I've spoken in 2 days. So,
well, thanks for having me. And I think you should just cut back to 3 packs a day. And
yeah,
right now.
Yeah, that's the trick.
Yeah, cartons of cigarettes are getting expensive.
Luckily I quit smoking when my wife and I got married, but I don't think I've even had a voice like this when I smoked. But Andy, let's dig into you for a bit. So, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and let them know why you're here? Because Tom and I both know why we're wanting to talk to you, but people that don't, like, I'm thinking of it from a when my kids go to they're homeschooled, and when they're ready for college, I have a whole concern of if they're homeschooled, what kind of issues I'm going to have. Tom, he has one homeschooled, one public school, so his views are completely different than mine. So I think this is going to be good for a lot of dads, a lot of parents, moms, whoever's listening right now, to be able to get a lot from you.
Good. Yeah, I'll listen. I'm happy to share everything that you want me to share. Everything you think is interesting and hopefully valuable to your audience. I'm a college advisor, which means a couple things. Our firm combines a few different things under one roof, including helping kids get ready for college, which your kids are younger, but I did do a presentation locally a 4 weeks ago where someone brought their second grader, which I thought was kind of funny. I go around the room. I say, so
Starting early.
What grades are your kids in? And most people are like 9th, 11th, 10th, and then this one woman said second grade. And my response was, of course, well, you're late. We recommend in utero. Everyone else seemed to get the joke, and she was like, "What?"
Excellent response.
Yeah. She did. So anyway, we help kids, figure out how to optimize their way into not just a great college, but a great college for them. So I'm really more of like a kind of a almost like a life coach. I hate that term, but trapped in a college advisor's body, and also a marketing consultant. I've got split personalities. So I don't really care where kids go to college, but I do care about helping them launch themselves to be successful post-college. So we help them get in. We help them pay. We have a whole separate division of our little firm that does all the financial aid applications, suggests strategies to improve eligibility, helps kids find scholarships, and anything related to paying. We have a lot of business owners who are self-employed who we help. And then we also do career counseling and some standardized tests like SAT and ACT prep.
All right. Now, let me ask this if I can, because I actually was very interested in the fact of you did a video on your YouTube channel, and it talked about not paying what colleges are asking. To me, I got a bachelor's degree, and I never knew that was an option.
Me neither.
There's discounts? Wait, what?
Yeah.
Is there a coupon code?
Yeah, right. I wish I knew. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I graduated with more than $100,000 worth of debt, and then I paid that off, and then I did it all over again by going to law school. And I don't really have regrets, but there was a better way to do it. And yeah, I mean, it's like buying anything. It's negotiable. A lot of colleges have these high sticker prices, but believe it or not, the average discount as of the date that we're recording this for private colleges is over 56%. I think it's 56.1% or 2%. So paying full price is it's a choice, right? It's not an obligation. One of the things I always tell people is, yes, you have to pay tuition, but you don't have to leave a tip.
Sure.
So depending on, everyone's different. everyone's kids, are different in terms of how they present, how they're positioned. Colleges are different in terms of how much budget they have and all that. But if you fish in the right pond and focus on generous colleges, and then as a subset, colleges that will be generous to your kid, then you don't have to pay full price at all.
So what are your suggestions for those parents that whose children are of that age as to how they could navigate that territory? Because I mean, I'm sure that's it's challenging for parents, probably even scary.
Yeah, I mean, in broad strokes, it's a combination of what I said. It's really it's a lot about what pond you fish in.
Sure.
When people talk about financial aid in general, and I don't know how many people in your audience have already started looking into this. It's usually like stuff about like, oh, you've got to do the FAFSA, a federal form, or you've got to do this or that. And sometimes people talk about strategies to lower their income or to move or shelter funds that are in one place that penalizes you at a very high rate compared to other places that don't have such a high penalty. And those are all interesting to talk about, and they do help some people. But what gets overlooked is, are you targeting the right schools? Because you can do all that stuff and then you apply to a college that's not going to give you any money no matter what, and you'll be shocked. You'll stare at your offer and be like, where's the beef? Or you can have a super low income on paper or actually and no college savings to speak of, and you think you should qualify for everything in the moon, but not so if you don't apply to the right schools.
Because they're kind of focusing on the stuff that won't move the needle, in other words.
Yeah, it's like a big black box, and the problem is that guidance counselors aren't trained in this. So
sure, and why would they be?
Yeah. Well, there's this. Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Who stands to benefit, right? Yeah, sure.
Well, it's people sort of have. I mean, this is just me. I have 4 kids of my own. I've been through this process. I've got 3 in college right now, and I have about 24 years of experience doing this, and I hear a lot of complaints from parents about their guidance counselors, whether the parents are sending kids to private high schools where they're paying a lot of tuition already with the expectation that they're going to get help, or whether they go to public schools. I don't really get a lot of complaints about guidance counselors from my homeschool clients, by the way.
I love my kid's guidance counselor personally. I think he's a great guy.
It's almost like we're on the same brain,
Yeah, exactly. Really on the same page.
Yeah. We can finish each other's sentences. But it's the reality is that guidance counselors in general, certainly at the public schools, are overwhelmed. They're not trained in these types of areas. They spend more time on mental health issues and scheduling kids and that type of stuff, and maybe, if they're lucky, 20% on college readiness and preparation. So they don't understand that the whole body of work from 9th grade forward is what goes on a college application.
Yeah. And
they don't understand about how to pay for it. They're not experts in financial aid or scholarships or things that we do, and they don't understand you've got to getting into college today is not about it's not about your grades and your scores, SAT or ACT. It's about how you market yourself. It's not a meritocracy. It's marketing.
Right.
And guidance counselors, they're not entrepreneurial. They're not marketing experts.
Right. I guess, to be honest with you, I hadn't even really. I mean, I guess I knew that it was part of their function, but it hadn't even really dawned on me that it was a primary function of a guidance counselor. I mean, I just kind of, in the back of my brain, maybe assumed it was at most a tertiary function, right? I mean, you wouldn't think, because guidance counselors aren't used for that, right? They're, like you said, for mental health and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think there's a mismatch of expectations that parents have versus what counselors actually, again, at private schools too, what they can actually provide. And, it's not a discussion. Most families won't even meet with their guidance counselors till about 11th grade. And the issue is that the whole body of work from 9th grade forward is really what gets judged, when you make that closing argument, when you apply to college. So all of the, not just the classes, but all the extracurriculars in school, out of school, other opportunities, that's all, half of that's in the books by the time you meet with your counselor in 11th grade. So that's one really egregious, obvious example of why people are many of them are kind of shocked or angry that they didn't, know. They didn't find out until 11th grade all the stuff they should have been doing earlier.
Sure.
Let me ask something, if I may, real quick, because I'm thinking about my personal experience when I went to school in the late 90s. And it's really nags at me that my guidance counselor said that the likelihood is I'd either need to do a trade or be a garbage man. They literally was telling me all the different things that didn't require school, and my guidance counselor was just junk because they didn't really focus much on the school, on the kids, if unless you were on a roll or one of the higher performing kids, they sent everyone to a vocational school. That was
Mhm.
just their, if your grade level wasn't straight A's or AB, you went to vocational school and hopefully you made it that way. That was their thinking. What do you tell parents that were like me? I was a goofball. I was a bit of a troublemaker, but I wanted to do big things as got older and what so have you. But the guidance counselor, everyone was pushing me. I ended up going to that vocational school, got a background in electrical. I've been working in construction on and off for my whole life, one way or another. But I design restaurants now. I have a bachelor's degree in business. I've done a whole lot of things that require degrees, or at least that's what they ask on the job offer. But
Yeah.
what do you tell parents that are looking at the guidance counselor that's saying your kid isn't going to go to college, your kid is crap, your kid, you better teach them how to swing a hammer before you teach them how to read a
Right.
book?
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting question. So in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with recommending
Oh
trade
no,
schools.
no,
Yeah.
I,
So
like I said,
I think a lot of
construction
people
was
go
my
to
life.
college. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people go to college who shouldn't actually. But in terms of like when a guidance counselor lowballs, a kid's upside, I guess. I can't stand that. I hate that. And I actually, one of the books I wrote was sort of with the help of about 100 people who submitted examples of bad guidance counselor advice on a webinar that I did a few years ago, and that turned into a book called "The Pocket Guide to Surviving Your Guidance Counselor's Lack of Advice." And I compiled, it was probably 30 or 40 bits of advice, including when guidance counselors try to suck the wind. Well, maybe they didn't try to. I think overall they're well intentioned, but I'll just
Sure.
put that aside. Doesn't matter. The
Unintentionally,
result
yeah.
is the same. I think they frequently lowball kids, whether telling them. And I did have a handful of people give that very similar example as what you just relayed, and then other examples like don't bother applying to such and such a college because you'll never get in there. We actually have a client this year who was told specifically don't apply for financial aid and don't apply to that college because you have no shot at getting in. And lo and behold, she got in. It was George Washington University in Washington D.C. And we applied for financial aid for them late, but still ended up getting what I would call a sizable award. So a lot of times the counselors and the even financial advisors and accountants, they give advice that's sort of predicated on their own experiences, maybe their own experiences growing up. I think a lot of guidance counselors color their advice based on their own biases that they've developed over decades, and they can give the same bit of advice to two different kids. What I see frequently in my practice, because most people come to me because their kids are trying to go to college, is don't take the extra AP class, the extra the hard class because it's going to be so hard for you next year. And then the parent or the child will say, is that the right advice? And I'll say, well, it depends on what do you see for yourself in terms of the types of colleges you'd like to be able to get into. And if they're gunning for an elite Ivy school or something along those lines, my answer is, okay, well, you're going to be competing with 50,000 other kids who have maxed out on those hard classes. So if you do not choose to do that, then it's almost like you're trying to win a fight with one hand tied behind your back. You're going to be at a competitive disadvantage because the guidance counselor gave that advice. Whereas for another kid who doesn't have those goals, which is fine, that might be good advice to not kill yourself by taking APs because guidance counselors deal with all sorts of that, stress and anxiety, and that's all they see. So I think it's well intentioned. The third thing I would say, and this is going to sound really, it can sound, I don't mean to sound snobby and annoying, but a lot of guidance counselors can't relate to high achieving kids who want to push themselves because they themselves were not that high achieving, and frankly, that's why they chose a career like being a guidance counselor, which is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's not like being in business for yourself. It's you have to get up every day and think about how am I going to make my next dollar, and so I think that informs some of these bad bits of advice also. So my advice for parents is always, you need to get out in front of this. You need to be proactive. You need to take everything with a grain of salt. You need to look at yourself like you're the CEO of this new business, which is getting your kid into college or helping your kid get themselves into college, and get informed as much as possible, because I'm not saying dismiss every last bit of advice that your counselor offers, but question it, see if it makes sense, and try to get a second opinion.
So I kind of have a question, and I kind of can imagine how you'll answer. But so I have 2 bachelor's degrees, and I now work in the trades. I'm a firefighter paramedic. My college education didn't, although I would argue that it significantly prepared me for life in the real world, it did not prepare me directly for my job, in that my job does not require a degree, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to people that, and I kind of feel this way myself to a certain degree, what would you say to people that feel that colleges in some way are a scam, right? That the trades are profitable for plenty of people, that they're a good career path to pursue, that college is, the majority of people go into college and end up coming out in debt without any real career prospects, right? There's a lot of arguments to that same kind of flavor. So what would you say to those people? Because obviously that's contradictory to your initiative to a certain degree.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not really for my own personal beliefs and how I work with kids, but in terms of someone who's a college advisor, obviously we're trying to help kids pick the right colleges for them.
Sure.
But like I said before, there are so many people who are in college who shouldn't be in college because they didn't know what else to do with themselves, and it's super easy to go to college and major in a gazillion things that will not help you in the real world. I mean, you can major in like sociology or gender studies, not to be politically incorrect, or whatever.
That's the first one that came to my mind.
And then you spend $100,000 to $300,000 and you get out, and what can you do? You can roll burritos or make coffee drinks that nobody can produce.
Or be a guidance counselor. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Sure. Yeah. So, by the way, I actually have a handful of guidance counselors who kind of, follow me, and, they enjoy it. They
I bet. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think college is appropriate if it's the means to an end, not the end all goal. So a lot of, you're probably not in this wheelhouse yet, but a lot of people, when they're searching around for college advice online, they come across all these different, ads and other things for, and I advertise online also. I offer a lot of webinars, but they'll come across things that are, messages that are like, 93% of our clients get into one of the top 3 choices, and stuff like that. And my response is always, well, then what? Just because you get in somewhere doesn't mean the rest of your life is all figured out. Because I could name 5 to 10 people off the top of my head who went to Harvard or places like that who are extremely not successful. Thought that was the bad move for them. Now, in retrospect, hated being there, and they should have gone somewhere else that was going to be a better fit for them for various reasons. So I think the whole thing is, it's a scam, like you said, in the sense that if you just swallow the messaging from the colleges themselves, you would think that, okay, if I just follow along and I spend $90,000 a year, my kid's going to get out and be happy and successful, and I'm done, and they're going to have to sit back with a catcher's mitt and just field job offers or something. It's not like that. I mean, it doesn't. Where you go is not who you'll be. Just because you go to some, I call it a rear window sticker college, on the cars in your district driving around doesn't mean that the rest of your life is like wine and roses at all. So I totally agree with you.
No, that's fair. That's I kind of suspected you'd answer that way, and that makes perfect sense. So there's a lot of bloat, right? There's a lot of degrees out there that really are not very useful in the long run when it comes to a career. And I like the phrasing that you used there too. The idea of college being a means to an end. I do feel like it's often marketed as the finish line, right?
Yeah.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. And to clarify, in my own situation, my career change was not a matter of necessity, like I would imagine it is for a lot of people. It was a decision. So luckily, I wasn't kind of subject to that same type of. I cautiously use the word predatory, but the same type of like predatory situation, right? Where they're charging you hundreds of thousands of dollars for a degree that's never going to make you any money. So
it's
no,
funny.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, you missed. It's something you just mentioned that I never talked about this, but I probably should. I'm glad you brought that up. The predatory thing. So, part of that is taking on, huge amounts of debt, right? That's sort of at the base of what we're really talking about here. So, I was talking to someone. I won't give any details because they may actually watch this. We have sort of one of the other services that we just started doing about a year ago is helping with all the student loan relief programs. There's some forgiveness, there's consolidation, there's different plans. It's sort of all in flux right now, because of the current administration. But she was relieved because my wife did all this. She's certified as a student loan specialist of $274,000 or $273,000 in parent loans that she took out to send her kids to schools, which I would say are kind of scammy in terms of what they charge. And she was saying, like, well, yeah, I mean, that was predatory. I'm like, wait a minute, like, how old were you when you took out these parent loans?
Yeah.
And she was like in her 40s or 30s, and
that's why I say cautiously. Yeah.
So basically, she was trying to absolve herself of all personal responsibility for having made these choices, and acted like, well, she deserved to be relieved of all this, and it was she was almost not grateful to my wife for helping her with this. But you have to be in control of all these decisions and get the right information, and not just rely on your counselor or the messaging from the colleges or anywhere else. And I am not anti Ivy League or anything like that. I mean, so I have 4 kids. I have my 2 girls each got into an Ivy League school. One chose not to go there. She went to Michigan, actually, like we were talking about off the air. And one of them did. And I see the value in all the types of schools that every one of our clients and my including my microcosm of my own family here has done. And again, it comes down to what are your goals? What are you trying to get out of it? And you may not know that, but we help try to clarify that, and then trying to set kids up in schools that are a good fit for them, where they're not going to get ripped off and they don't necessarily have to pay sticker price, or it depends on each family's goals.
So I have a question I want to ask you, and then this is going to lead into a question about homeschooling, because I know me and Eric kind of want to know what's going on there. But so what motivated you to kind of start Lockwood College Prep, and then ultimately what kind of like services do you guys offer? What can you do right for a parent whose child is approaching college age?
Sure. Well, I kind of stumbled into it, I didn't grow up wanting to be a college advisor. Never heard of that, of course, growing up. So no, I practiced law. I was an attorney for a publicly traded brokerage firm, financial services firm, and then in Miami. And then after we got sold the second time in like a 90-day period, I was like, okay, this is not going to work out for me. So I ended up kind of picking up my packing up my desk and taking a few of the guys I worked with. We started our own financial services company, and I started going to conferences to learn about how to market the business. And I met a guy who was pitching. He was a college advisor out of California, and he was pitching a coaching program where he would teach people how to be college advisors. So I did that. That was early end of 2000 actually, and I didn't really I started pursuing that a little bit, but it was ultra part-time. I didn't think it was like a real thing. And
Sure.
yeah, and then because people thought college was expensive back then when it was like $40,000, right?
Yeah.
So then I started becoming more and more sort of enthralled with it as I saw the problems that people were having,
Sure.
and there weren't any other obvious solutions for them, which is nuts when you think about how much college can cost you to not have the resources to be able to figure out how to manage all that. So we started off initially focusing just on helping people pay, doing the financial aid applications, strategies to improve their eligibility to pay and all that. And then after around 2004, we started getting into, okay, well, what does it take to unlock the game in terms of getting into a school?
Sure.
Because it's not just based on how you look on paper with your grades and your scores. It's also about the extracurricular stuff you do, how
Right.
interesting you are and all that. So we help with the paying and the getting in. We also help with career counseling. We also do test preparation like the SAT and the ACT.
So one more question prior to we getting to the homeschool, and you might be apprehensive to answer this, and that's fine. But what kind of price obligation are we looking at for parents that are going to be coming in and utilizing your services? I'm sure it's a vast array, but just to kind of get the ballpark.
We're pretty high end. It's a broad range. If they hire us primarily only for the financial aid consulting, it's a much lower range. It's about $3,500. And if they if they want the more of the comprehensive sort of private guidance counselor type of services, I take on a few clients myself. I'm actually trying to wind that down. But if someone hires me in 11th grade, it's like $30,000. If they work with one of my associate advisors under my supervision, it's usually starting at $10,000 to $12,000.
Gotcha.
And but we customize it, so those are sort of
sure.
It depends on what people need. They don't always need everything that we have to offer. So then
that's
less.
Fair.
Yeah,
I appreciate your candor. So now the homeschool question, right? So I don't know how many homeschool parents you actually work with, but like Eric's got his kids are homeschooled. My middle daughter and my youngest daughter will be homeschooled, so I've got a kind of a long road before it's going to be an issue. But right. So what kind of things should we look for as homeschool parents to help prepare our kids if they decide to go to college, to make them look good to a college, and kind of how do we traverse that territory, right?
Sure. We've had a handful of homeschool kids over the years, and I would say overall they tend to be better prepared, at least academically. They tend to be more curious people and more mature.
That doesn't surprise me, but I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. They tend to show more initiative because you sort of have to, and getting to college is a lot about how you market yourself and whether you can stand out and whether you're interesting. So a lot of the homeschool kids that I've worked with and know they've usually gone deep in at least 2 or 3 interests or activities or something like that, and they're more likely to do that than the non-homeschool kids that are more typical of the people that we work with. And I'm usually in a position where I'm encouraging the public school and the private school kids to do that, whereas the homeschool kids are already organically doing that.
That makes sense.
So focusing on atypical things that appeals to admissions officers, because a typical admissions officer gets 1,000 applications to review each year. They can't spend more than 6 or 7 minutes on each application, and that's to review everything: the transcripts, the extracurricular activities, the essays, the letters of recommendation.
It has to stand out.
Yeah. So someone who's interesting in any way, particularly homeschooled, and maybe going deep in 2 or 3 types of interests, that's refreshing, and that's sort of what they're looking for. So you're sort of at an advantage that way. Of course, you've got all like the curriculum stuff that I think that's pretty standard fare. Making sure you're taking all the requirements, but taking the hardest classes that are available, I think, is very helpful too.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, right, the ACT, SAT is kind of the ultimate determination, right? So regardless of whether you have formal schooling credentials, I would imagine that the ACT, SAT probably takes precedent, or am I incorrect?
No, you're not incorrect, but it's interesting. There's been of late, there have been a lot of colleges that have sort of walked back the test optional policies that
there's been a lot of critique of standardized testing lately, so that makes sense.
Right. So right around COVID and the pandemic, a lot of schools said, okay, we don't need your test anymore. And because in fairness, a lot of kids would drive up to test centers and they'd be closed during COVID. If they drove 2 hours, from New York to New Jersey or something, right? So, but what's happened in the last, I'd say, 2 years is, as colleges are now digesting the stats, they've realized that they would rather see the SAT and the ACT. So almost every Ivy League school, and I think University of Miami was just one of the latest ones. It's not an Ivy League school, but a lot of other colleges are now requiring the standardized test because there's so much grade inflation, right? Not in homeschool, but I can't tell you the last time I met with a C student. They all have 84 averages now, right? So like when I was growing up, there were C students.
Yeah, well, you got to make it look good on the books, right? You need the money, you need the funding.
Or you don't. You need parents not to holler at them, threaten.
Yeah, that's true. It's the reason every patient gets antibiotics.
It's a whole theme that pervades. Yeah, exactly. So there's it's hard for admissions officers to figure out whether someone can actually succeed in college and do the work, just based on GPA. So the test scores are number one. They're not perfect, but they're more accurate predictors of how well someone's going to fare in college academically. And number two, they were also one of the motivators behind the policies was to broaden access to underrepresented minorities and other diverse students. And it turns out that the net of test optional policies was like a 1% increase in diversity at most colleges, and zero
a decrease in aptitude.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it's two different things. So they failed in both areas.
Sure.
At least in the eyes of many colleges. There's still criticisms about it. But for homeschool kids, getting back to your question, I think it's really important to show that you can do college level work by doing the best that you possibly can on the SAT or the ACT, because that answers a lot like the internal questions in the minds of admissions officers. Like, I know they're homeschool, I see their grades are great, but how smart are they, or how well will they do here?
You said something kind of insightful there too. That is part of the reason that part of the reason I was motivated to homeschool my younger children. The idea of I feel public schools do a really good job of making people average at things they suck at. And I feel like homeschool does a really good job of making children great at something they're good at. And I think you kind of touched on that too in regards to what a college is looking for, right? They're looking for those children that are really, really great in a few things, right? An inch wide, mile deep, right, if you will. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, my version of that, I totally agree with you. My version of that is that you spend so much of your time in school trying to play up your weakness, trying to prove your weaknesses, as opposed to playing to your strengths, right? And so it's almost like, I'm guessing you're familiar with. Have you ever heard John Tyler Gatto? Gatto?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, so look him up. I think his story was he was like the New York State Educator of the Year, and then he's a teacher, and then he wrote this book about basically how high school education is a scam, and then this year or something, which didn't really sit well with his peers. But what I remember is that because it stuck with me years and years ago, was that his argument was, no, actually high school is working in terms of how it was designed, what it was designed to do, which was basically in agrarian Massachusetts to get people off the farms and into the industrial the factories. And that's why you go to class and you sit there not questioning the boss, and then the little bell rings and you shuffle off 50 minutes later to the next, what are you really learning, except how to be a good industrial worker, right? So so I thought that's very interesting, and I just kind of made things click for me in terms of one of the failures. But what you need to do, whether you're homeschooling or not homeschooling your kids, is to encourage them to develop interests or to expand on or accentuate their current interests so that they can go deeper, because it's going to be, number one, personally valuable for them. And like a real education, not schooling, but a real education.
Sure.
And then number two, just if you take care of that,
that's an important distinction.
Yeah, I probably got that from that book too.
Then okay, you can steal it.
Yeah, I have no original idea. And then the second thing is that it's if it's something that you've gone deep in because it's valuable to you, then inherently it should also quote unquote look good for college. Whereas like a lot of people that I know around Long Island and places like Long Island, New York, are trying to do it the other way around. Like, what's going to look good for college? And they just kind of like randomly slap together, I'm going to form a charity and we're going to do a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and we're going to raise money for breast cancer, autism, and a disease to be named later. And everyone, and then and really what every admissions officer does is sort of either actually or internally just roll their eyes, and they're like, yeah, I know that mom did all this, right? This is not helpful. So that's the opposite, the inauthentic way to get into college.
Let me ask a quick question, if I may. And it's sticking in my head that you said that you really need to start focusing at 9th grade and up. Now, when I started getting into homeschooling my son, everybody kept talking about transcripts. And now, mind you, kindergarten, I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I kept track of the classes and how he did this and that, but I didn't make like a grade card up for him, But I've seen a lot of people talk about the grade cards, the transcripts that they do every year from kindergarten to senior year. Is that something as a homeschooler that I need to actually worry about because if my son goes into, say he decides, okay, college is not the route for me, the journeyman that's looking at his resume going, oh, I see you learned how to wire a switch, you learned how to do this. Okay, great. Let's set you up on an apprenticeship and go. He's not going to sit there and go, well, I see in kindergarten you didn't do that alphabet right.
Sure.
How likely is college going to actually look at all that? Like, do I really need to worry about the elementary and middle school level transcripts and all that? If my daughter, if she decides to go to college, or my son wants to become a zoologist or whatever it is, where do I even need to worry about the transcripts and report cards before 9th grade?
Well, colleges don't care about anything that happens before 9th grade. So from that perspective, I would say no. But in terms of whatever you need to do to set the table for 9th grade, then you might have other requirements that don't have anything to do with college, but they have to do with the high school grades. Right. So, but not from a college standpoint. No, you can overlook the F in coloring or whatever. Whatever they call.
Right. Man.
You didn't share well in 3rd grade.
Let me tell you, my kid, not good in coloring. Just kidding.
So another similar example as the 2nd grader. I had I used to have a sort of like a joint venturing type of agreement with a tutoring company that specialized, local to me, that specialized in bringing kids from China overseas and getting them educated, and then into the high school system, and then whatever. Okay. So I actually had a meeting. I drive over there and I sit down. They would stack the meetings up back to back, and this dad and a 3rd grader came in. That was my previous record. And they're sitting down, and I'm like, do you have an older sister, older brother? Like, no, I'm here for her. I'm like, okay. And she was literally coloring. She had a coloring book. And I had a translator too, so that I knew in retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have been making jokes, but I was like, oh yeah, Harvard likes primary colors. And he goes, oh. I mean, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah.
He's taking notes.
Yeah. Because the translator was just, repeating my joke. So barring anything like that, I don't think you have to worry about the elementary school years or the middle school years, other than how they position you for high school.
All right.
Stick with the primary colors. When in doubt.
Here we go.
So did you have a follow-up, Eric? Or?
No, I didn't really.
I was kind of doing a cursory investigation of your website and some of your content and stuff, and I noticed the idea of, I just believe it's something you've coined. It's the P4 system, right? You guys have been working on that for 20 years, right? A couple decades now. Is that, am I correct in assuming that's kind of an integral part in your philosophy? And if so, can you describe it, explain it to us?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's the reason I tried to pull something together like this is because the way most people who work with college advisors or don't look at this whole process is sort of in silos. And it's like, oh, I know I have to do more extracurricular activities, or I've got to write a good essay, or I need to find scholarships. Those are all different things. So the system that we created integrates all those things. It's kind of like, if you go to a doctor for something, like a specialist, a cardiologist, you don't want them to prescribe you medication in the vacuum if you have like a lung issue or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Taking a holistic approach, kind of.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're covering everything that has to do with getting in and paying for college under one roof. So that's actually a big difference. And then the other really big difference is the first P, which stands for planning or backward planning, is that it's aligned with, I don't really care about the 4 years. It's more about the 30 or 40 years afterwards. So the first step with us is to explore that. We have a career counselor. They give each kid an assessment. They do a debrief. They come up with maybe 3 or 4 or 5 places in the world that, number one, match with how they're wired, objectively speaking, not based on like whatever TV shows they watch or something. And number two, information about what you can earn in terms of salaries and all that, and job growth, etc. And basically, it's places in the world where kids can love what they do, so work doesn't always feel like work because they play most of the time. And number two, get off the mom and dad full ride scholarship. Eventually, once they get out of college. So that's the first step, and that kind of informs everything else. The second P in P4 is path, which is backing into a set of colleges that's reputable across a sort of a cluster of majors. Because most people, they just go right to the college thing, and we're like, no, forget about college for a week or two. Let's talk about what's next, and then we can get back to it. And then the third,
I like that. Let's talk about the goal, and then we'll work backwards.
Yeah, because no one knows. I mean, a lot of 50-years-olds don't know what they want to do with the rest of their lives, but 16 or 17-year-olds, who say, "Oh, I want to be a forensic scientist or something."
Yeah,
I'll know with sooner or later they're saying, "Yeah, I watched all the NCIS shows. That's why." So
I did that for 6 months actually.
Yeah,
forensic investigator.
Well, it's cool, right? It's cool, but it may not be exactly what people do on TV. Just exactly. I was never a forensic investigator.
I don't watch Chicago Fire and think you know what I do.
Really? Oh, that's weird. I thought that was.
I know that's a shocker, but
What about dousing my fire? Yeah, bursting my bubble. Okay. And the third P is position, which is really like an advertising and marketing term, because what you're doing when you apply to college is trying to say, I know there's 50,000 other kids that look the same as I do on paper, but this is why I'm different. And the example I give a lot is, you guys may not remember this because you're a little bit younger, but there used to be a great commercial by Avis Rent-A-Car, which was, we're number 2, we try harder. And that was a perfect example of a lot of stuff we've been talking about, which was emphasizing a strength, not trying to overcome a weakness. Because I know this is a long form podcast, so I'll give you 2 extra minutes here that I would never bore anyone else with. So I, in between college and law school, I bartended at the Four Seasons in Boston, which is where I grew up. And one of the guys who I saw almost every week was the founder who sold out, but the founder of Avis Rent-A-Car. He and his wife Avis, they were regular customers. Yeah, really nice guy. And I remember saying, like, that was like a really cool slogan. We're number 2, we try harder. And how'd you come up with that? And he loved to talk about this stuff. So he said, well, we knew we couldn't compete with Hertz because they were the gorilla, the 800-pound gorilla. And our ad guys were like, okay, well, why don't we try to turn that on its head and make the fact that we're smaller a strength, not a weakness. So the ad was like, we have to try harder. We can't afford dirty ashtrays or chipped paint on the cars, and we can't get away with that stuff. We have to hustle for it. So that was a great positioning of them as like the David versus Goliath, which is like a broader type of metaphor, and it worked really well for them. So that's
obviously
I'm always thinking about stuff like that. How am I going to help this kid position himself to get into college?
Right.
Yeah, and then the fourth P, so it's plan, path, position, and the fourth P is produce, which is about finding money. Like, are you going to qualify for need-based aid, or if not, are you going to qualify for merit-based aid? Can we help you if you're a business owner? Can we help you free up money from your business instead of forking it over to the IRS? So there's anything that has to do with money, all the paperwork. We try to negotiate with colleges too, which is a whole nother thing. That's the fourth P.
Let me ask this: you're talking about, and again, when I went to college, it was all I was given was for government grants and for loans. Those were the only two options I was told. I was never told about any kind of merit base or grade base. Help people understand, if you would, that what the difference between them is and what they should be asking about when they go to look at colleges about those kind of financial aids.
Yeah, good question. So need-based aid, which is what most people think about, is based on parents' income, savings, and 70 other factors: age, number of kids in college, whatever. And you need to fill out paperwork with the FAFSA free application for federal student aid. By the way, all this could be like, by the time this airs, who knows if those, the Department of Education will even be around, right? But let's assume that it's still going to be around in shape or form. So there's a federal form. It's not terribly hard to fill out, but there are some nuances, and it's easy to make mistakes by oversharing or disclosing things that you shouldn't be disclosing. Like they'll tell you, for example, it's like on social media, it's okay to overshare like the last bowl of spaghetti you had, or how your toes look on the beach, with the water in the back.
Okay?
It's annoying, but it's okay. But on the FAFSA or these financial aid applications, it's not okay to overshare.
Less is more.
You might actually rob yourself of money. So if you, for example, question about disclosing your savings, if you include your retirement accounts like an IRA or 401k or something, you're going to receive less aid because you're not supposed to disclose that. So there's ways to make mistakes that can actually cost you money by errors of commission like that or omission without really understanding the strategies. And some other colleges, most of the private colleges that our clients apply to, also require additional financial aid applications beyond the FAFSA. Something called the CSS profile, which is like 200 or 300 questions of really intense, invasive stuff. And I don't do any of that. My wife does all that. She's weird. She likes doing all that stuff. So we do all that. That's need-based aid. And then merit aid basically means everything that's not based on need-based. It can mean your grades, your scores, community service, any attributes. It could just be that, Tulane University likes to get mass affluent and rich families to apply there. So what they do is they'll say, okay, our sticker price is $93,000 a year, but they'll give, $24,000 scholarships or $26,000 scholarships to most of the kids that they want to attract, because they know that the parents will still be able to come up with the other, $70,000 or whatever that is.
Well, and a lot of people are going to turn away when they see 93,000, not even try. Well, ultimately, which is
they're not
their
marketing
intent.
for those. Right. They're not
Exactly.
The lower income people. They're the marketing for the people who are chasing status and prestige.
Right.
Because so it's like a discounting game, but you also get bragging rights. If you're like, oh, my kid got a scholarship at Tulane, right? So they understand that too. There's all the psychology, behind all this that's just worked, for years.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that's again, paying a sticker price is not an obligation. It's a choice. So it's really a matter of targeting those colleges that offer that. And then the second half is, how does your child stack up compared to their competitors? Will they be able to, will that college be generous to them specifically?
Sure. I have kind of a question that Well, it's interesting to me. It might not be interesting to everyone, but I'm asking the question. So, um, so how do you see your business going forward in regards to the ever-changing political landscape, like you had just mentioned?
Yeah.
And also, how do you see your business evolving in the future? More services, an alteration of the services you offer now? It's a complicated question, but I'm just kind of curious.
I think this podcast could just put me out of business. I don't have a plan B. What do I do? No, uh, I actually love what I do. I love working with kids. I love we get such great reviews and testimonials from our clients that we know that it's very gratifying. It's like it's very cool that we can actually help people, because there's a million ways to make money, but when you can actually genuinely help people with huge problems,
it's very fulfilling.
Yeah, it is. So I have a very high opinion of myself in terms of how, the job we do. I think I'm pretty good at marketing and all that. But the real thing is that college is more and more expensive every year and harder to get into every year, at least for a certain sort of echelon of schools and certain types of families that we help. So if that as long as that's around, those two dynamics are around, then we're going to be able to be to provide a value service.
You have a need to fill.
Yeah. So it's right. So that's how I look at it, and connecting with them, is I do a lot of things to connect with those types of families to help them out. So I think that is a that opportunity, I think, is going to be around for our lifetimes, I would hope.
Yeah.
But things could change, but I just they're not changing so quickly. And then in terms of other things, we help, like I mentioned, the student loan relief programs that we have.
Right.
Yeah, that was something that I was like, man, we know so many families that are drowning. I mean, that was my experience too. I paid everything off. It took me a long time to pay off my grad school loans. I paid off my undergrad loans because I lived at home and I sucked it up and worked 7 days a week for 3 years. But then I did it all over again, and I'm personally sensitive to that. I was like, that there have to be other people who have this type of situation, and of course there's like $1.6 trillion of student loan debt out there, and then the parent loan debt on top of that is it's got to be another couple billion at least. So that's an example of something that we felt we should help with. It's just a little unsettling because of what's happening with the political dynamic. We don't know which programs are going to survive, which are not, but we can still help people. They don't all save $273,000, but they can change their payments from $4,000 a month to $750 a month, and then get the balance forgiven after 10 years or after 20 years if they're public servants. So that you might actually qualify for something like that, for your kids if you continue to be a public servant. And teachers and nurses, some doctors who work at community hospitals. There's a lot of doctors out there with a ton of debt. They don't know what to do. They just default.
Med school is expensive.
Yeah. We see people graduating with $700,000 worth of debt for dental school in some cases.
You go off and make $40,000 in a fellowship for 3 years. It's just...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one of my best friends from growing up. I was just down with him in Florida about 6 weeks ago, but he went to Harvard Med, and when he first got out of his residency and he got a job in Boca Raton, in a very high end area. Harvard, he was like, I've never made more than $40,000. This is like uncharted territory for me. But even a lot of doctors who get out and they practice, they're not making the money that they used to make.
Yeah.
Because of all the insurance, medical insurance reimbursements, unless they go to like a private concierge type practice where they're charging people. But all the other ones, a lot of them go into medicine because they're already. My friend was actually telling me this. Like, out of the 7 people in his residency program at Harvard, I think 4 of them were independently wealthy. They didn't need to care about money at all, because they came from substantial means. And then 2 of them were not necessarily but they weren't just motivated by money. They were okay, making a good living, but they weren't, trying to, make a lot of money. And he was the only one out of the 7, my friend, who left the Harvard system because he needed to make more money. So he got a job. So it's not all it's cracked up to be. in terms of earnings for a lot of these doctors.
It's worth mentioning too, in regards to your previous response. It's worth assuming that this is not the first time that the landscape has changed, probably even drastically in the past. And so
Yes.
it's certainly worth making note to the listeners, anyone interested in your product, that your aptitude is not just in regards to the system as it is now, but your expertise is in navigating an ever-changing system. So regardless of what the future of the landscape may look like, right, your expertise is in the adaptability and being able to research and understand the nuances of that system, and then help to optimize it for their child. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's a fair point. I'm sort of at the ground zero of my business, but from a 30,000 foot view, like you just gave, I mean, it's there's certain themes like college is expensive and it's getting more expensive, and college is hard to get into and feels like it's getting harder every year also. So, but no matter what the rules and regulations are and all that, or the latest scandals, or whatever happens, because there's always something.
Mm-hmm.
The SAT just changed its format recently, and then the ACT just changed its format more recently, in response. So there's always new stuff that seems to be on the minds of and stressing out and a lot of families who have kids headed to college.
Yeah. Oh no, it's changing.
So
well, we've done this before.
Okay.
We've been before.
Andy, your whole world revolves around colleges and all this, so you're paying attention to all the trends and this and that. I know from when I went to college years and years ago, it's much different than when a kid would go to college now and what they would see and experience and deal with. What, from your experience and the things you're seeing, what do parents, should they expect their kids to be going and seeing differently than what they went to college, or from what they grew up hearing about colleges? Because I hear all sorts of nightmare stories and what so have you about colleges now compared to when I went, where I was like, okay, it was fun, pretty girls, fun times, things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I don't get that one a lot. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, the today's college experience can still be like that. So my daughter in Michigan, she's in a sorority, she was president, she's, she, however, game day outfits laid out in the summer, for the whole fall season, it's like all very like, girly girl, rah, college experience, tailgating started at 7 a.m. for the, 1 o'clock game, that type of the Jello shots and all that. So if that's something that people are still want for their kids, or the kids want that, you can still do all that. But then what's changed is a lot of the I mean, I don't think it's as bad as people think, but some people are kind of fed up with a lot of the sort of woke ideology and the censorship and all that, and that definitely does exist. But I don't know how bad it is across the board. Certain schools like Columbia and a few other schools, it probably is that bad, but for the most part, like the stuff I see in the media, it's probably not as bad as that. The same thing with all the protests that happened after October 7th and all that. There was, so one of my kids goes to Cornell, which is a real hotbed for all the protests, and we're Jewish. And so she was really uncomfortable, rightfully so, for the first several months, and that was year one. Right. My daughter in Michigan,
Michigan State too, right? I was going to say, because Ann Arbor.
University of Michigan was more like that. Michigan State's not as bad that way, but University of Michigan is.
Okay.
And then, but then the summer came around, and the following year, which is this year, the 24-25 academic year. I think the way they both described it was that 95% of their lives were the same, and then there's roughly 5% where they, kind of, for whatever reason, felt uncomfortable and all that. But
gotcha.
So that wasn't around, when you were going to college, or when I was going to college.
Yeah, no.
And all the and putting that stuff aside, the political stuff aside, also the you could waste a lot of time in college studying stuff that wouldn't help you prepare, for anything.
Right.
But the stakes were a lot lower in terms of the amount of debt, the economy, the pay structure of jobs and all that. So you could, I think people could afford to screw around a little bit more than now, where I think now it's, you have to be a lot more focus on what are you going to get out of college so that you don't end up with bills you can't pay.
You actually kind of touched on something that me and Eric were interested. I know we're getting close to the end of the time, but you kind of touched on something there that me and Eric were interested in, and that's kind of how do you go about optimizing your class choice and avoiding some of the unnecessary classes that really aren't relevant to your overall career trajectory? Because obviously that's a big part of getting a diploma is checking boxes, and ultimately every time you check a box, you're cha-ching, cha-ching, right? It's just costing more and more money. So how do you kind of optimize that? As a student or a parent?
Yeah, no, that's important. There's, I'll tell you how the advice that we give. There's definitely other ways to do this, but so the first step is trying to figure out what I said before is like what careers and majors that lead to those careers are potentially a good fit, could be of interest, and the rest of it is reverse engineering that. So you get your butt into the career center at your college, and you figure out, okay, the people who graduated last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago with this major, where are they now? You can talk to the career center people. You can talk to department heads at colleges. You can do this before, when you're touring colleges, you should be thinking about doing these types of things too. And there's all sorts of ways to reach out to people in those fields from those colleges through LinkedIn. You can filter people that way and all that. So I think understanding like what they did to get where they are is a great way to not reinvent the wheel and to figure out what steps they took. And if you actually have conversations with them, because most people will actually do that because they like talking about themselves, and they kind of wish that they'd done something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's my favorite subject.
Yeah.
So I was hoping we'd do another 3 hours, actually.
I can give you 30 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So the other thing is not only the recommendations, but of what to do, but what not to do, what to stay away from.
Right.
That's at least as important. So yeah, that's how we recommend kids do that.
That's great advice. I mean, following in the footsteps of people that have been there before, right? They've already laid the path. So,
right. And the other thing that this is much more of a narrow sort of tactical thing, but if you visit a bunch of colleges and you go on tours, and you're interested in being an engineering major or something, and your tour guide is a theater major, you're not going to. Chances are you're not.
I did both of those majors.
Your crossover.
Before I graduated.
You're the
I didn't
one
graduate with either degree, but I did. No.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's amazing. And naturally you become a firefighter. So
obviously.
Clear path. Yeah. So if you were on a tour and you hadn't had these experiences yet, and you were curious about what your life could be like as an engineering student, you probably won't get it that way. But if you got a meeting with the head of the engineering department and we're able to have a 10 to 20-minute conversation, they're always longer, but that's what I always recommend how you pitch it. You will get a lot more information on what you could get out of college in that major. And the secondary benefit to doing that is that most colleges now have extra essays. So you've got the personal statement where you're writing about your favorite subject yourself, and then you've got the extra shorter supplemental essays at most colleges. And one of the more common topics is why are you applying here? And if you can, and where a lot of kids fall down when they write that essay is they just say generic things like, "Oh, I always wanted to go to school and
my dad went here.
And there's so many employment opportunities and internships, and but that could literally pertain to like 50 colleges. So you have to be more specific to be convincing. And if you can pull out some of the nuggets, from the raw material of your conversations that you had with department head and professor, then that's going to be a much more persuasive essay. But they're both important, in order to figure out if that was a good fit for you and what you can get out of it, and equally, mistakes to avoid. That to me is the most important thing, but it definitely could have that secondary benefit of being a good essay.
It's a really good point, actually. Yeah, you kind of pay attention in those interviews, and you're going to kind of pick up those nuggets, because obviously the head of the engineering department is not going to speak negatively of the engineering department that they're the head of, right? So you can kind of pick out those little specific things that might make that department great, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you though, actually, an engineer, it's not just engineering people who tend to be, not salesy, but I've actually I've had a handful of people over the years tell me that they had a discussion with the professor, and he was pointing out the pros and cons of their program versus other colleges, and it wasn't a selling thing. They don't work for admissions. Yeah, they're just being kind of honest.
That makes sense.
So so I thought that was
unbiased. That is
I mean, I didn't anticipate that, but once the kid told me about it, I was like, yeah, that actually makes sense, because they don't attract kids who are not going to be a good fit for them.
Obviously, right. I mean, do you find that those individuals in those, I mean, kind of like higher ranking positions, I guess, if you will, are open to having those types of meetings with prospective students?
It's definitely mixed. They don't all respond, but a surprising percentage of them do, and they don't have a lot of kids soliciting them like this. Which is another reason for doing.
That's another good point. If you do decide to go there, they won't forget you.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the stories I always remember, and this is going back at least 10 years, because this guy has been in the workforce. My former student. It's all a big blur to me, but he was thinking about majoring in engineering or physics, and they were driving from New York up to Vermont or something for a vacation. And I said, as long as you're going up that area, why don't you stop by at BU, which was not on his radar at that point. So he's like, really? I'm going on vacation? And the mom was like, yeah, let's do it. So I love giving advice that kids don't want to hear. That's sort of a special gift that I have. So
it's like my favorite pastime as a father.
Exactly. Right. You two are paying me for it. My own kids ignore this. So he did that, and then when they came back, he said that was awesome, because he told me about the physics kids who have this exchange program in CERN, Switzerland, smashing semiconductor particles and all that.
Sure.
And about 70% of the BU physics kids do that, and that wasn't. I never saw that on the website. I didn't know anything about that. So he's able to write his essay about that, and he got in and got money, and so it was very vivid for me that experience.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's a big recommendation that nobody does, but I think it's there's no downside to trying to do that, only upside.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, so we're kind of getting close to we're past the end of the hour, but my question is, just to kind of lead out a little bit. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
The whole thing again. Sure.
Yeah, just take it back. No, so just tell us kind of like a little bit about yourself, like where people can find you, where they can find your content. Talk about your books a little bit. Just kind of give us a cursory, outroduction, if you will, of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say other than my website is lockwoodcollegeprep.com. The business is Lockwood College Prep. My last name is Lockwood. It's not a coincidence.
There's a theme.
Yeah, didn't just happen. And phone number's on there. You can text us from there. So I would just suggest that's if people want to learn more, go to the website. A bunch of my books are listed there, and they're. I just finished one which I haven't actually promoted yet. It's but that's on Amazon right now too. So it's the College Myth. So there's I'm all over.
I'm interested.
So, yeah.
I'm already interested.
Yeah,
it's a good title.
Well, I think do I have one here? Yeah, I wrote a book on negotiating college, on getting into college, but
okay.
The one that I think might be, if you have other listeners that are like you guys homeschool wise, I would recommend the Pocket Guide
Gotcha.
to your guidance counselors, to dealing with your guidance counselor's lack of advice.
Okay.
All right.
How to survive. Yeah, the Pocket Guide on how to survive your guidance counselor's lack of advice.
You got too many books. The titles, they just be.
I don't even know why every time I come up with an idea, I'm like, I should do that. So I have a list of another 20. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Stop writing them down. Just let them pass away.
Yeah, really have issues.
It's okay. I'm the same way. I get it.
So, Tom, where do people find you at if they're looking for you?
Yeah, so all of my content currently is on Twitter. @EarnHerRespect is the Twitter handle. there's a link there to go over and get on the email list to get any updates or anything like that for new content. I'm currently working on 2 books. One is a children's book, and the other one is kind of like a user manual, I guess, to navigating the relationship and territory in the modern age, which is challenging for a lot of young men. So that's kind of what I got going on now. And then obviously the Call with Dads podcast, which I co-host with Eric here. And you can find all the links for that in the show notes, which he'll tell you all about. So, Eric, what about you, my friend?
Well, obviously, if you can understand me with this fun voice, Call with Dads is where everything can be found. We have the bios for Tom at Earn Her Respect. We have Mr. Pancake's bio and, of course, my bios, which I go by EA Maynard through online networks. So everything from our audio, our video that can be found on YouTube or Rumble are able to be discovered through callwithdads.com, which, if you don't know how to spell call with dads, we have some issues. But generally,
you might have gone to public school.
You might have just done so.
We're homeschools. Yeah.
But all of our information, all of our links are here in the show notes. Even Andy Lockwood's information is going to be here in the show notes. And you can find everything. We're going to try to tell you everywhere to find him, because if you want the best for your kid and they're going to go to college, I'm not saying you have to go to college. Trust me, I question if it was smart for me to get a business degree while I design restaurants. But the general goes hand in hand, obviously. But generally, if you're going to go for something just dedicated to a degree like veterinarian or engineering, of course, college makes sense. But with that being said, look at our show notes. Visit callwithdads.com. You can find more about us there, find all of our past episodes, you can listen to Andy's conversation with us as many times as you like, because listening to it just once isn't going to give you all the information. You're going to have to listen to it multiple times, and then contact Andy to find out the things that you really want to know that we didn't cover. So with that, Andy, thank you very much for being here. We're going to end this conversation for everybody else, but if you can hold on, I'd like to talk to you just for another minute. Just for another minute more.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for having me. Can I make one more recommendation too?
Of course.
There's a documentary. Well, it's a docudrama, I guess, on Netflix called Operation Varsity Blues that covered the whole college scandal that happened, and I'm actually in it for like 53 seconds or something. Not as a suspect, but as an expert.
I'm glad you clarified.
You never know where this is going to go, but I actually it's basically a dramatic rendering of the wiretaps that led to getting Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman or whatever sentenced. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think it's just entertaining. The guy did a really good job with the movie, but it just shows you how crazy some crazy parents are, and the extent to the things that they'll do to give their kids an edge, sure, which all backfired. But just who else is out there? Because parents are crazy. So it's good from that perspective also. Operation.
In other words, just don't do that. Hire Andy instead.
The head prosecutor who put them away in Boston, his cousin who's a lawyer just hired us. So I was like, that's interesting. Yeah.
That's a heck of a reference.
Right, I guess you weren't turned off from college advisors. Yeah. But it is a good movie.
Very nice. So definitely again, check Andy. That out. Andy, thank you. Again, hold on. And everyone else, thank you for being here. We'll talk to you on the next episode.